So this was my 37th 24 Hours of Daytona in a row. I've had many opportunities to learn what not to do because I have jacked it up many times.
If you're at 4 hours going, oh, we're going to win this thing, we're going to win this thing, you start doing dumb things, or at least in my experience.
I was going to say, if you're me, you just continue doing the dumb things you did all night. But carry on, please. Matt said, I think we need to blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, yeah, you do. Yeah, that's good. Oh, yeah. Sam likes that.
Yeah.
And you're like, yes, you do. Drive how so-and-so would blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. At one point when we didn't need the code anymore, Matt goes, we're done with old Formula One drivers, right? And I said, yes.
Welcome back to It's Not the Car. We're back. You may have noticed we were on hiatus for a bit. If I sound a little tentative, it's because I haven't talked into a mic for weeks at this point. I've been talking nonstop around my house, as my wife will tell you, and that's awful, and you should never walk into my front door because of that. But we launched this show, and we did one episode a week for an entire year. And then, well, if I'm honest, we needed a break. The holidays happened. I co-founded a new business with a couple of partners. Ross and Jeff each had life events of their own. And Jeff quietly went off and won the 24 Hours of Daytona, not for the first or even the second or third time. And that's what we're going to talk about today, coincidentally, because it is beyond rad. But we'll get to that in a bit. The thing is, now that hiatus is over, we're all very happy about it because now we get to talk about driving in circles in front of a mic again. My name is Sam Smith. I'm a journalist and a club racer, and I spent my entire career working for car magazines, testing fast cars and slow cars, and race cars, and asking a lot of questions of people a lot smarter than I am. And that's a long list of people, and thankfully, the two people I man, there's a Freudian slip. Two people I co-host this show with, they're on that list. Hi, Jeff. Hi, Ross. How you been? It's been a while.
I've been good, Sam. Good to see you guys again. It's been too long. I'm Jeff Braun. I help out the AWA guys on the scoring stand, talk to the driver, and give the crew guys a suggestion here or there, and enjoy doing it.
You paint that like you're the janitor. Jeff is a competition director for AWA, the competition director. Ross, you're a person. You do things. What do you do?
Well, I used to race, and in fact, I used to race at Daytona. And actually, when I say used to race, I'm actually going to go and do a race in the very, very, very near future.
That's amazing.
I'm going to go and drive a race again. So see if I've forgotten how to do that. But besides that, I used to hang out at Daytona all the time. Now I hang out virtually at Daytona and, do some writing. And I was thinking the other day that I've written some books like Speed Secrets and stuff, but I think if you took all the, 9 or 10 of them, they're not even 10% as entertaining as Sam's book is.
Oh, wow. That was a slick plug there, my friend. Yeah. And I am deeply grateful and will shamelessly accept it.
I was thinking man, wouldn't it be cool to be able to write something that's entertaining as opposed to the educational, hopefully, stuff that I write. So anyways.
Again, Ross, you're not the janitor. Your books are very educational and very entertaining. But
hey, Sam, just wait a minute. I remember early on getting to know Jeff, and I forget what team we were working on, Jeff, and you saying the job of the engineer is to do whatever it takes to make the team operate better. And he says, if that means taking the garbage out, I'll do that. So Jeff's always been a janitor.
Always. Whatever
sure,
I can do. I have no really job description. I just do whatever I can do to help.
What are the main comments we got over the last year? So many emails, so many DMs was, Ross and Jeff have done so much, and they talk about it. At some point they should just come out and say what they've done. Like just do a whole show talking about their careers where they list it all out, because all they ever do is aw shucks. And then you Google them and you find out that Jeff has more wins at so-and-so track and so-and-so circuit in so-and-so series than, half the people I know combined. But that gets to what we were talking about here and why this show exists, right? This is a podcast about racing and stories and the choices that people make under pressure. And sometimes those stories have happy endings, right? Sometimes they have absurd or terrible endings. Sometimes they don't have endings at all. And sometimes a scrappy little IMSA GTD team with a big heart, a team that hasn't had, frankly, much good luck or podium time for the last year or so, sometimes they go and win one of the largest and most difficult endurance road races in the world. So we have a friend of the show to thank for how we're going to do this today, how we're going to talk about it. Jeff's win, that is. Ross got a text last week from one of his friends, a listener. Ross, it was Dave Billings, right?
Yeah. Great friend.
So Dave asked if we'd break down what happened with Daytona, because as we tape this, it was very, very recent. It was days ago. Dave asked if we'd break down what happened with Daytona and Jeff's win, how it happened, right? Not minute by minute, but walking through the race in segments, kind of explaining motivations, what he's thinking, what the team is thinking, and what exactly Jeff's job looks like on the ground, how the drivers work, how the cars work, how everything works in that kind of big, giant, densely populated fishbowl of motorsport. And that sounded like fun, so we're going to do it. So, Jeff, I know, because again, I mentioned I started a business last month. I have a family, all these other things, blah, 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 real life. I'm a blank slate here. I know 3 things about that race. I know you guys won GTD with AWA out of Toronto in a Corvette, which is amazing. Applause.
Thank
Clap.
you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I know Tommy Milner stuck a middle finger out the window of a factory Corvette on the broadcast and got caught in a photo doing it. And 3 days later had a t-shirt with that image on his merch site, which was excellent. My friend Zach Bowman found out about it and was like, I'm buying one, bought one. And 3, I know that my friend Parker Kligerman was doing okay in one of the Lamborghinis and crashed before the car crashed out with someone else driving in, I think it was the middle of the night. And that's it. That's everything I know about Daytona this year. So why don't you just kind of kick us off with what was it like going into it? IMSA's had a lot of changes over the last year, not just torque sensors like everybody knows, but there's a lot going on with the series that's kind of in flux. Where was AWA sitting? Like, what's the wallpaper and context on this like?
Yeah, I think the number of times during the week, the recent Daytona week, where I said to our crew guys, think about, somebody would say, oh man, because some little thing happened or it wasn't fitting right on the car or whatever happened. And I would say, think back where we were 12 months ago. 12 months ago, our car, we couldn't drive it out of the pits without it stalling 7 times because the automatic clutch thing wasn't working right. The alternators would fail every 2 hours and the car would stop on the track.
Yeah.
Yeah. The power steering would fail. The thing, neither car finished the race. One of them barely made it to halfway. It was a total disaster. Brand new car, brand new Corvette. And so it wasn't just us. The factory cars had the same problem. So that's where we were 12 months ago. We were horrible. It was a total disaster. Then one of our customers quit and left because the car was not up to what he had expected. And our guys just kept working and working and working. Pratt and Miller kept working. They're the guys who build the cars. They kept working and improving things. General Motors put the resources and funding and effort behind the powertrain end of it. And by the end of the year, with everybody on AWA working so hard, we were one of the best teams on pit road. We won the Bob Aiken Award, which is for the highest finishing bronze driver and an invite to Le Mans. Things were looking pretty good. So we went into Daytona super pumped. You never think, oh, we're the favorites to win Daytona. You're not. Nobody is. But so that's kind of how we kicked off the Daytona weekend. Yeah.
How long have you been going? What was the first year you went? Because it's not just your first win. It's not just your second win or third win, but also you've been going for about as long as I've been alive, right?
Yeah, you were saying, experience. Yeah, I know. So this was my 37th 24 Hours of Daytona in a row. So I know exactly, not exactly. I've had many opportunities to learn what not to do because I have jacked it up many times. And so, 37 in a row. This is my 37th.
Yeah, and Jeff, you pointed out something there that I think is really interesting. It used to be 37, 30, 27, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you could look at the beginning of the race and you could go, those are the favorites. You know, that one car is by far the favorite, or those three cars are going to win. Nowadays, you can't do that in any class. And you look at qualifying, you look at the practice. I forget what it was like in GTD, from pole to 10th position was, what was it? Like, it was like barely, like tiny little tenths or something like that apart. Exactly.
Well, and I'll have to give credit. I think a lot of people harp on IMSA and the rules and the BOP and all of that over the years. I would like to give credit where credit is due. The torque sensors, which we're not going to get into how the details of it right now, but every car is now required to have a sensor on the rear axles that measures how much torque, basically how much power it has. And so now we don't have restrictors. We don't have, a lot of that is limited. Everybody has a fixed amount of power, and you can't cheat it because it's sent back to the amount of power you're putting out, torque you're putting out is sent back to IMSA constantly on telemetry. Those torque sensors have now eliminated, maybe not the right word, but highly reduced the amount of fiddling with the performance of the car. So now it was a pretty level playing field. I don't think anybody thought that they were super disadvantaged or advantaged. And so I'm giving them credit for that. They're expensive. It's cost, each team's going to spend another $250,000 a year to run these torque sensors and service them and repair them and replace them. Man. I haven't heard anybody who has to pay that who's not willing to do it in order to get the fairness that I think we saw at Daytona. So,
and that's important, right? And for those who don't know, right, the big struggle with road racing since the dawn of time, all racing since the dawn of time, is how to balance the need for and the kind of big magnet suck for creativity, which is why everybody gets into it. The need to have an advantage over somebody else, whether that advantage is fair or unfair, as Mark Donahue's book was famously titled, and the need to make the series, whatever series you're talking about, whatever rules you're talking about, to make it authentic and make that competition real and not just so-and-so is faster this year because we say so, therefore they're going to win, right? And what IMSA struggled with for so long and frankly done a really good job with, and the FIA has pulled the same kind of levers in Europe and around the world to dial this, is how to balance, for lack of a better term, how to balance that performance across the field. And we should actually do a whole show on this because it's really interesting. But the torque sensors in particular they're not Jeff, you're far more equipped to speak on this, but they're not the ultimate solve, but they're a very, very good solve for determining who's making what kind of speed, how they're making that speed, and whether they're sandbagging or not. And you can't game it. It's very difficult to game it, right? It's very difficult to quietly cheat in a way that a lot of the BOP, balances over the last several years have not been, right?
You could hide it before, and now, there's still little bits, but you're going to get to the point. GTP saw this. They had torque sensors the first year, and people were still doing the old BOP, I'll just lift a little bit early and kind of coast into that corner to take a couple tenths off the lap time so it doesn't show how good we are. And with the data and the torque sensors and all that, IMSA sees that. By the middle of this first season of GTP, everybody went, there's no point. If we're doing that in practice, we're not learning how good our car is, how good it can attack the center of the corner. We don't really know. We're just wasting our time. Let's just go, give it what we got, practice like we normally practice, try to make our car good. And if our car or somebody else's car is too good, the torque sensors will show it up and IMSA will adjust it. And that's kind of what happened in GTP. And I think GTD maybe isn't there yet. Some people still think you can game the system, and maybe they're way smarter than us and they can. But I bet the same trend's going to happen. GTD is going to get to the point where people just go, and IMSA will balance it. So pretty happy with that. So anyway, we got off on a tangent, but
yeah. So let's get. It's really interesting tangent is the unfortunate part. Let's get back to Daytona. So going into it, we were talking before I clicked the record button. I was about to say before the show went to air, but before I clicked the record button, you said something like, that's the one thing that runs AWA, the team you've been with for the past couple of seasons, is the idea that you guys don't do anything special, nothing flashy. You just grind away. And that was Ross kind of laughed for a second when, well, it's very Canadian. And he's right, but it's also a very sensible way to get from A to B when you're starting from the bottom. So just a little more context before we jump into the race. There's you guys, how many Corvettes are in GTD and IMSA at the moment? It's just 2, right? Or 2 teams. It's you and Pratt and Miller, the factory team, right?
Well, nope.
Oh.
There was, this year there were 5 Corvettes at Daytona. Okay. There was the 2 Pratt and Miller, the 3 and the 4, the ones that everybody's used to, the yellow 3 and 4, factory ones in GTD Pro. So they're factory supported cars. There was our AWA 13. They're the black and yellow one. Cool livery, by the way.
It is cool. But there's John Player special vibes about it, which I like.
That's what everybody says. Yeah. Then there's DXDT, who ran the Corvettes in SRO last year. They've joined full season in GTD with a Corvette in IMSA. So they'll be full season. And then there was a one-off from Trackhouse Racing, which is a NASCAR and MotoGP team owned by Justin Marks, good friend. And he did a collaboration with TF Sport, who runs the Corvettes in the WEC series. So for a one-off deal with his drivers for just Daytona. So there'll be 4 Corvettes in all of IMSA next year, 2 GTDs, AWA and DXDT, and then the 2 GTD Pros.
Oh, cool. Man, that makes sense. I was actually going off what I saw at VIR last year, but that was last year.
Yep.
So when you go into a race like this, and set aside what you've done before with that team, but a lot of what we've talked about with AWA and your work there in particular, both on and off the air, is how you build a team culture, how you work with people to get the best out of everyone, and to help everyone else help everyone get the best out of themselves, right?
Yep.
So going into it, start with quali and pre-race. What did that look like? Were you focused on just getting ready for the race? Were you focused on being quick? What were your big concerns there? How did that look?
Well, it started way back in last November. We looked at what our goals were going to be, what we wanted to do. They looked very similar. We were going to go for that Aiken Championship again this year. And then we look at it kind of like you would look at a race strategy. You look at where do you want to be at the end of the 24 hours? Victory circle, obviously. How do you get there? What's important? And you back up. And they have, I think most people or a lot of people know about what's called the roar, which is like, it's a practice the week before the race that everybody gets to go practice and run the cars and test and all of that. So we started looking at everything way back at the roar. Okay. And that would bring us to qualifying. Okay. Who do we want to qualify the car? IMSA mandates that whoever qualifies the car has to start the race. Well, we have a bronze driver, Ori Fadani. Most teams with bronze drivers want to get the drive time of their bronze driver done as soon as possible in order to run your pro guys at the end of the race. So we qualified Ori, and so he could start the race and start getting his drive time done early. So then you go, okay, we're going to qualify Ori. How does that look? Well, that impacts how we're going to practice, because Ori's going to have 15 minutes of driving time by himself with very few cars on the track. So that means he doesn't have to have use as much practice of the normal practice so we can use our pro guys to help set the car up. So you're backing up constantly, back all the way to the roar. How much time do we need for Ori? Because and how much for the other drivers. So for us, qualifying was another practice session. Give Ori some new tires, light fuel, go out and rip one with no pressure to have prototypes coming whizzing by and stuff like that. So that's all qualifying was for us.
That's one of the really cool things about Daytona or Le Mans or a lot of the big endurance races, right? Period, in road racing, is that it's such an odd mix of extremely quick pros and differently ranked drivers who can be quick but aren't quick, sometimes in the middle of the night, aren't quick in rain, aren't quick in traffic, or have differently balanced strengths as opposed to somebody who's good at everything, right? I mean, Ross, you've spent a lot of time working with people, especially there. Like, what do you think about when you're working with people who are at different balance of speed? How do you work with them in the same car on the same day?
Well, I was going to say that it used to be, boy, I hope I don't insult anybody with this, but they probably aren't listening to this anyways. There used to be bronze drivers, gentleman drivers, amateur drivers who would come to Daytona, they'd pay their bucks, they would drive the car, and they would be, way off the pace.
How way off? I mean, we know way off. I know spank means way off, but how way off?
Easily 5 seconds off.
What did you say it was earlier, Jeff? It's 100-second lap, something like that?
Yeah, it's a little more than, it's like 108 seconds is a good GTD time.
Yeah. Wow. So you could have somebody that's 5 seconds off. Now, they were probably the exception, but there were some of them like that. And then there were some that were 3 seconds off. And then, the good AMs were getting down inside of, 2 seconds off. And now AMs are 1 to 1.5 seconds off pros. And so I'm going to say, the pros haven't gotten that much better, but the amateur drivers have gotten a lot better. The quality of the amateur field is, wow, it's amazing.
What was the shift? We need to get back to the actual walk through the race, but this is too interesting. What was the shift? Was it sims? Was it the rise of cheap sims and cheap data? Like people actually access to information? What?
Yes.
What changed?
So I'm going to say,
it depends.
First off, it was competition.
Yeah.
It used to be some amateur drivers would do a race or two a year and they'd put a little effort into it. Nowadays, those AM drivers are, they are working their butt off all year round, and they're in the sims, they're doing data, and they've got coaches working with them, and all the tools are helping them become better.
Those guys are so competitive. They've made enough money to be able to afford this very expensive sport. By definition, I think that makes them competitive people because they've succeeded in whatever business they've been in, and you probably have to be pretty competitive to succeed in that. That carries over to their racing. What they'll do is they're looking for every edge. They'll go out and they'll find a guy, a top coach like Ross, and they'll hire Ross. And Ross is not inexpensive, but those guys will spend.
His face. He just had this innocent rabbit face. What? He was just like, who? What, me? No, of course not.
There's bidding wars to get a guy like Ross because of the improvement that the driver can get when they get a guy like Ross. Those guys want to be the best of their peers, their gentleman driver, their bronze drivers. They want to be the best they can. They'll go out and they'll hire a coach like Ross and work with them and get better and better and better. There's a lot of the reason or the selection process to hire a pro is how good that pro, not just how good he can wheel and can he win the race at the end of the race, but how good he can teach the bronze driver. We have our two main guys, Matt Bell, our main driver, and Lars Kern are our two pros, Matt being all the races. One of at least 50% of the value of Ross is how well he coaches Ori in how to get better, how to be better. Because the plain simple fact is the pros are pretty much all they're within a tenth of each other.
Yeah.
If Matt can get Ori to go a half a second quicker, which is quite reasonable on a race weekend, if he can teach him how to get a half a second better than the other bronze drivers, Matt's going to get in the car further up the field and have a better chance at winning. And Ori's going to do better. So that's an important aspect of it.
It's always
and
interesting.
I know sorry, Sam, but I know we're going to get into this, but sure looked to me like Ori did the job at Daytona.
Man, he was amazing. And I will say, his ability to keep it on the lead lap, we went in his 4.5 hours, we only went down a lap once, which is normally you'd expect to be 3, 4, you'd expect to go down a lap a stint. And he didn't. He went down, in 5 stints, he only went down 1 lap, that's one of the big reasons we were able to win that race.
Okay, so we haven't even gotten to the start of the race, but I just want to, you mentioned Matt coaching. When I was at VIR with you guys last year, you were kind enough to let me sit on the box for a bit. I was building an episode for the show. We're going to release that in a bit. But when I was sitting and listening to the radio, and I had met everybody earlier in the day, and everybody was great and wonderful. And Matt has this, he's kind of a reserved Englishman, has a light accent. And I'm sitting on the radio, just kind of staring out at the track, and my mind started to wander. And I heard this very calm, lovely British voice come on saying things like, "Oh, brake a little later here, pick up the throttle a little there, use a little more curb." And I'm like, man, what a nice coach, what a lovely man. I didn't meet that man today. And I asked you later, and you were like, "Oh no, that's Matt. That's just his coaching voice."
Right.
It was like he had a switch he flipped, and
Yep.
that's what's really interesting. But watching Ross coach, watching anybody who drops into the mode where they're thinking about what somebody else needs from them, how their personality changes, how their approach changes. But on that note, so okay, we decided to break 28 minutes in. We're getting to the race finally. We decided to break this into 6-hour chunks, right? Which means we got 4 chunks of the race to talk about. It's 24 hours long. So the first chunk is start, right? Start to hour 6. And that encompasses, the race starts just before 2:00. I think it's like 1:40 in the afternoon or something, right?
Yep.
It starts, you guys, there's days of build up on the ground, and, weeks of build up elsewhere. You have strategy, you have what you think's going to happen. You know that in that first 6-hour chunk, sunset in Florida this time of year is around 6:00. So 2/3 of the way through that 6-hour chunk, it's going to get dark. You're going to transition into night. Like how does that first chunk of the race work? What are you thinking about? Knowing too that any endurance race is, you have a plan, and that plan can sometimes be thrown out the window because real life, right? You never know what's going to go on.
I tell my crew guys in the meeting before the race, the night before we have a meeting, on what we're doing and our strategy and stuff like that. And it's at Daytona, it's the team that wins the race is the one that adapts the best to the problem, not the one that has no problems, because that team doesn't exist. It's the one that adapts best to the problems. And that's what you have to be ready for. That's what you have to be prepared for. You have to try to guess all the problems that could happen. After 37 years, I have a long list of problems that can happen, but there's always new ones. So you're trying to do that before the start of the race. Then once the race gets started, you can't plan a 24-hour race, but you can have some guidelines, paths that you want to take. So in the first 6 hours, we're just trying to make laps. We're trying to not screw up. That doesn't mean we're going slow. This is gone are the days of saving the car and being easy on the car and saving the brakes and watch the gearbox and make sure we be really gentle on it for 24 hours. No, that's gone. We're as fast as you can go from lap 1. But the risk reward tolerance shifts. So we're not taking a lot of risks. If you could stuff it in there on another GTD car in on lap 10, you don't.
I always love that phrase.
You just wait. Your risk tolerance is low early. And then you can ramp that up as the race goes on. But you're still going as fast as you can, as hard as you can. You're not saving anything. So we put Ori in the car. Ori starts the race. We get through the start of the race safely. And he does a double stint right off the start. 2 hours. It's about 2 hours. Then we put Lars in, who's our third driver in the long races. Super experienced guy. Anybody who's ever knows anything about street Porsches knows he holds like every lap record on the Nordschleife in a Porsche for production cars. I mean, he's the guy.
Yeah. So just a little context here, because you actually have a really interesting base of drivers on the team, right? There's Ori, who is the amateur. And the main pro is Matt Bell, who has a long history in Europe in prototypes. He has a background in touring cars. I believe his brother was a BTCC driver at some point?
Rob. Yep.
Yeah, Rob Bell. And then the third one, your drop-in, is Lars Kern, who I know from my whole career, because he's every time Porsche spits out a new GT car or road car, they'll strap on a set of some quasi road tire and go and deeply do all these strange and quasi okay things to the car that still let it qualify as production, and then take a road car and theoretically something off the production line and go run lap times at the Nürburgring and try and set. That's where all those ring times come from. And for the longest time, Lars has been the guy for them, helping dial those things and setting them and setting the times. And he was jumping into the AWA Corvette for Daytona. And where else does he come in?
All the 3 driver races. So Daytona, Sebring, Watkins Glen, Indy, and Petit.
Cool.
Yep. And that's the kind of guy he is. I mean, he drives all these crazy different Porsches with different tires. We throw him in the Corvette and he just does his thing. He's plug and play. He's so simple. He's so easy. He just drives fast and gets the job done and thinks. He's a real thinker too.
What do we call those drivers? USB. Just plug them in and let them go, right?
No, USB, right.
I thought you were going to say thinkers, and I'm like, what do you call them? I don't know, dangerous? Yeah. No. Okay, so
no, Lars is so that, and then we had. We also had Marvin Kirchhoffer. So we have 4 drivers at Daytona because you need that. Well, you don't need, but it's nice to have that 4th driver. Marvin is He's currently a factory McLaren driver.
Cool.
Drove for Pfaff last year. A German young kid, super fast, and also gets the whole thing. He wasn't trying to set the car up around him or anything. He was driving Matt's car, the one Matt liked, set up the way Matt liked it, giving good feedback. And he just gets in the car, same kind of thing. How many laps do you want me to drive? 10. He drives 10. Do you want me to go slower? Yes. Save fuel? Yes. Just does his thing. Marvin, great.
Jeff, you bring up a really good point of drivers that show up for endurance racing and they're unable to manage their ego, and they get in the car and it's like, I gotta set the fastest lap time. They're bad. They're bad news.
For sure.
But, the drivers that, who just show up and do the job. The team that I've worked with, TDS, Charles Malisi, who drives in the World Endurance Championship, and, he is out there, like how good he is. And, he's the 4th driver for Daytona. He just shows up and he just drives, and he doesn't cause no fuss, no muss, just does the job. And, yeah, I'm sure you've worked with drivers who show up and they're like, I got to prove how good I am.
Yep.
And they're just a headache for you, I'm sure.
It doesn't work. Marvin, whatever. Lars did his stint. Marvin did a stint. And then we put Ori back in for a triple. And we're still in the first, we're maybe to your 6 hour mark there. And Ori did a triple stint and he was done with drive time. About 6 to 7 hours in, we had Ori's drive time done. Doesn't mean he's completely never going to drive again. The plan was for him not to drive again, but if somebody got sick or hurt or there's some other reasons where he could need to drive, he had to stay ready, but we got his drive time out in the first 6 hours, which was important. I don't know that any other bronze team knocked their drive time out as quickly as we did.
And that's, again, for those who aren't familiar, that's how the driver ranking structure works in a race like this, right? And it's designed so that a team can't just show up and go like, well, our AM driver is our slowest driver, and it's mandated that he drives, so he's going to do 2 laps, and then we'll run the rest of the race. And that's been a part of motorsport in 1,000 ways for a long, long time. But
Yep.
so you said he had 6 hours of mandated?
He had to do 4.5.
4.5. Okay.
So the minimum drive time was 4.5 hours.
Okay.
Yep. So he did.
What?
Yeah. He in 7 hours, he was done by 7 hours. He does 4.5.
And the advantage to that, I forgive me if I get this wrong, but the advantage there is that once you've got that off the table, and you know that as much as as important as it is to have Ori in the car and as valuable part of the team as he is, once you've got that off the table, you know that you have fewer variables to work with, and you know that the other drivers that you have that can reliably turn out a slightly higher level of pace. You can play with the sliders more, and it's less of an unknown, right? Going into the rest of the race.
Yep. I mean, even if you had the 4 best Formula One drivers in your car, one of them would be the slowest, and one of them would be the fastest. And you would want to get your slowest guy done out of the race and not have to drive anymore as soon as possible. And you would want to save your fastest guy for the last part of the race. It's just what everybody's going to do.
Hi, it's Sam. This, right now, is a commercial for the podcast that you're already listening to. I'll make it quick, I promise. So we have this thing called Patreon. You go there, and for a few bucks a month, you can help support this show. You also get neat perks like bonus episodes, access to quarterly live Q&As with the hosts, merch discounts, and some free Speed Secrets training from Ross. Now, we don't make a profit off this show. We do it because we love it. And what that really means is that every penny we raise through Patreon goes toward keeping It's Not the Car on the air and free of ads. This sort of thing sounds good? You can join at patreon.com/notthecar. Thanks for listening. Back to the show.
You don't want your slow guy against their fast guy, even if there's only a half a tenth different. You still don't want that. And so everybody kind of has that same theory.
And that's one of the things you see in kart enduros all the way through club racing enduros, all the way up to the top to Le Mans, Daytona, and everywhere else. There are so many times where an endurance race comes down to, at the end, you have to either push beyond, almost beyond what the car and driver have in them, or save fuel almost beyond what you think the car and driver have in them, right? And so much of that is about kind of stacking the deck for what you don't know is going to happen. So what is it like when that track in particular and that race shifts into nighttime? And what happened this year when the sun went down for you guys?
It was so leading up to the race, it was very cold at night. Race day was actually probably one of the warmer nights. Wasn't warm, but it's still warmer, which was good for us, good for everybody, because we're not allowed tire warmers in IMSA. So you're going out on cold tires, and it's treacherous. The GTP cars their tires are really bad in the cold. I mean, our spotters were helping our car pass GTP cars. I mean, we would come out of the pits, even with a GTP car coming out of the pits, and we would pass them. GT cars would pass GTP prototypes coming out of the pits for the first, until the bus stop. We're faster than them. So night is tough. Night is maybe, it's night, but it's not dark. At Daytona, the lights are so bright. They put the big speedway lights on that they run the Daytona 500 and the Coke 400 or whatever.
Yeah,
at a pretty high intensity.
Now it's weird. They're bright enough that they cast shadows. Like I've been there at night, and you're walking around. It's like I don't know if you've ever been to the Bonneville Salt Flats, where the whole place acts as a kind of a giant photo reflector. So it's like the sunlight's coming up from the ground, literally bounces off the ground and comes to you. Daytona's almost like that, where like the concrete and pavement, the paddock, it's like the lights are so bright that they're like shadows start doing weird things. And the light comes up from the ground, and it's surreal.
And it is so much more light than there used to be, except in the bus stop.
Right.
The bus stop still is just, it's dark enough. And what they did this year by removing the grass and paving that whole back, a lot of drivers struggled with that. The visibility back there, like trying to determine where exactly do I turn in here. And I was impressed with how great a job just about everybody did there. There were a few offs, but it was, I'm going to say this year the bus stop got more difficult for every driver because there just wasn't the contrast between that you could pick up at night this year. So well done to everybody. So yeah.
Exactly. The references, there were no visual references.
Yeah.
And they changed the curbs. Yeah. So the curbs were entirely different. The track,
less forgiving.
Right. Way less forgiving. And because of that, for us, the track was slower. The shape of the bus stop and where you were allowed to drive was exactly the same as it had been in the past. But the curbs were so much more aggressive that you were a little slower.
So Jeff, I know like with the LMP2 car, the P2 cars, I mean, if you hit the curbing too hard, you just destroyed the car. And I know through practice with the roar and stuff like that, there were teams that were having suspension failures, and GTP cars had that as well. What was it doing to the GTD cars? Were they hurting? Were they damaging the cars if you hit them too hard?
Yes, I think so. Right next to us in the pits was the Inception Ferrari, and they went out of the race with a pickup point that they pulled out of the chassis halfway through. And I'm not saying that it was because of the curbs, but we saw that in, like you said, GTP cars, other GT cars. We worked really hard. Charlie and Baptiste, our two race engineers, worked really hard on damping to get the car to be able to use a little curb. We weren't clouting the curb, but a little curb and not be so harsh. One of the biggest improvements our drivers said during our practice was that when Charlie got the spring and damping combination better, it was like, wow, yes, that is much better, much easier. The lap times were quicker and more consistent because it would ride those curbs slightly better. When I say ride, we could nibble them. We couldn't run over them, but we could touch them a little bit. Where before you used to just, when they were those plastic strips, you used to just drive right over them.
I was going to say, how much I've seen pictures, and it's surreal too, because for years and years looking at that the bus stop is on the back stretch of Daytona, right? It's a chicane, essentially. It's a fast chicane, but it's a chicane. And years of looking at it, and all of a sudden the grass is just gone, and it's pavement, which was done, I believe the reason was NASCAR safety, right?
Yeah, I think there was a NASCAR car got sideways there and basically dug into the grass and flipped over.
Right, which is a whole other discussion, but looking at it now, I've seen pictures, but I haven't actually paid much attention to what they've done to the curbs. How much taller are they? Because I remember the little plastic guys.
Yeah, these are true FIA. FIA has actually drawings and heights and dimensions of approved curbs if you want to build a FIA track. And these were FIA approved curbs.
Fun
so
much fun.
I'm going to say, how tall were they? Well, they start out angled and then they get taller and taller and taller as you get further in. So you can touch them, but if you go a little further, it's worse. And if you go a little further than that, you destroy the bottom of your car.
Without giving away exactly what you do and what you did, from a philosophical standpoint, generally, what do you want out of a damper if you're looking to kiss a curb like that and not necessarily ride it, but not go, full two wheels in the air, British touring car over it? Like what are you looking at when you're dialing a damper for that?
The simple answer is softer.
Right.
But then the downside is the bus stop is a transition type of thing. You're left, right, left quickly like that. And so if you get too soft, the car gets too rolly. So what you want, if you can get it right, is you want a pretty digressive damping curve with a blow off so that when you hit that curb hard, it it's like a pressure relief valve. It blows off and becomes soft when you hit something really abrupt, but isn't so soft when you're cornering in, transitioning the car in slower corners.
And Jeff, I don't want to go way off on a tangent here, but I'm curious.
That's what this show is, Ross.
This is lots of tangents. I love it.
Exactly.
We're 6 hours into the race at 45 minutes into our show.
So, welcome to the It's Not the Tangent podcast.
There's a shirt.
Or it is the tangent. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. So the other thing with a softer dampers, springs, and stuff like that is, makes the car, it doesn't transition very well. But like our P2 car, that platform is aero-wise is so critical through there. How critical is it in the GT3 car compared to a P2 car or a GTP car, a prototype versus the GT car?
Not as critical, but I think a lot more than people would think. The bottom of our car, when we drop the floor of our car, it looks just like a P2 car. I mean, it's a big carbon fiber floor with a little diffuser in it and some strakes in the back. It looks like a prototype floor. It's doing a lot of work. The underside of that car is doing a lot of work, and the aero platform is important. I'm going to throw out some guessing numbers that people would like, just to give an idea. If the aerodynamic importance of a prototype is 10 on a 1 to 10 scale, a lot of times you'd think a GT car is like a 3 or a 4. It's more like an 8. Those cars make a lot of downforce, and they're very sensitive. It's one of the reasons you see GT3 cars stacked up in a race, and they can't pass each other, because they're so aero sensitive that you get behind a car, and it screws up the aerodynamics, and you just don't have the speed anymore to pass them. It's super important.
Okay, so where were you at the end of those? Getting back to the calendar, so six hours in, it is now 8 o'clock at night. Where were you guys in terms of position? What was your strategy like, and what were you thinking about? Drive time had been done.
Yep.
You have most of the race left to go. What's that look like?
It looks like, first of all, where were we? And when you asked that, I thought, well, the answer was we didn't care.
Daytona, yeah, that's all.
We
that
didn't care
matters.
where we were. At 6 hours, we were still going around. That was checkbox 1. It's funny, we had kind of this funny checkbox thing. We made the first lap, the pace lap, and took the green. And Baptiste, our junior engineer guy, he goes, well, there's checkbox 1. Because 12 months ago, we didn't even make the pace lap. We were stuck on pit lane. We started from pit lane.
Oh God, that's right.
Right.
Yeah. What happened? I don't kind of remember. You told us then, but
the alternator had quit.
oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was checkbox. Okay, we took the green at 6 hours. I'm sure somebody on our pit stand went, well, there's 6 hours. Check that one, because we're still running. We didn't care, but we looked at it and went, and that's when we looked at it at 6 hours and went, holy smokes, we're on the lead lap. Lori's drive time's done, and we're on the lead lap. We had got 1 lap back through strategy under yellow, and we're like, right to plan. And
Nice.
Then we start looking at our driver start. Then the driver rotation becomes more and more important, and you back that up from the back. We want Matt to finish. Matt and Marvin, speed-wise, I don't know. They're both really, really, really top GT pros, but Matt's our guy. Matt's the guy with the most experience. So we wanted Matt to finish. We wanted Marvin to be right before him. And then Matt and Marvin, you kind of back that up. And then there's Lars in there. You're going to run a bunch of Lars laps. Lars got to do the overnight hard, heavy lifting work. And so then you start looking at how that's going to play out with yellows and things like that. Tires were another thing that at about 6 hours, we only got 25 sets of tires for the whole week. And a stint is an hour. We have to do 24 stints, and we burned up 1 in practice. And yellows can affect that. So do we have enough tires? Where do we have to double stint tires? Do we have to double stint tires? Do we just do left sides instead of all 4? Michelin won't let you double stint right side tires. So you have to factor that in. And so all of those things start to come in. Now the thing is ramping up toward more risk. We'll be a little more tolerant, both strategically and the drivers, a little bit more tolerant for risk. Not much, but a little more. And we're starting to look at performance. And maybe in another 6 hours, we'll look at where we are as long as we're on the lead lap, and then start figuring out how we can move up the order.
So I have to ask, I'm assuming the answer is because banking, because left turns, because load, because safety. Is there any other reason the whole Michelin won't let you double stint a right side tire?
That's it. You just nailed it exactly. The right side tires take such a load in the banking that they're worried that a double stint could cause a sidewall failure or something like that.
Yeah, makes sense. So, okay. Hours, big old jumps here. So the next 6 hour chunk is hours 12 to 20, right? Which includes dawn. Things start to warm up. The sun comes up. The track changes drastically. It drops down to a minimum temp in the middle of the night and then starts rising again as the sun comes up. This year, you sent a picture at one point. We have a little text chat that's the three of us and our producer Mike, and you sent a picture at one point that was it was you, Baptiste, and a couple of other people, Andrew,
Charlie and Andrew.
Was in it.
Yep.
Charlie and Andrew.
Charlie,
yeah, team owner and engineer, Andrew and Charlie respectively. And they were everybody was in giant parkas. And I forgot until you just mentioned a while ago, the weather. I forgot this was in the middle of the giant cold snap and winter storm that kind of annihilated the East Coast this year. So how cold did it get? How did that change everything in the middle of the night? How did it change how you thought about when things were going to warm up again? What's that like?
It was cold. It always is cold at Daytona. Even when it says it's warm, it's not. It's cold. Sitting in that scoring stand with the wind blowing at 2 a.m, 3 a.m, it's cold. I think what saved us was, for the first time ever in 37 years, the guys, and I can't remember exactly, maybe it was Lionel, one of our crew guys. He came up with these little heating pads that we sat on that plugged in. And I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. And so we're sitting on he's like, taps us on the back and is like, here. And I'm like, what is this? And I sat on it. It's like, oh, this is like heated seats in the scoring stand.
It's not often another human warms your rear end and you're grateful, right? Like it's one of those things you want to just acknowledge.
I'm not sure which crew Lionel gave them out, but I mean, whoever that was, thank you very much, because that really helped. That was fantastic.
Jeff, to me it always seems like that. I don't know, maybe 10, 11 o'clock at night till around 4 or 5 in the morning, it's just grunt work.
Yes.
That's where you put a driver in the car, and just say, just go turn laps. You don't be a hero, but don't lose anything. Be good in traffic, be good to the car, be good everywhere, and just plug out, just turn laps, grind away, right?
Exactly.
And it's not it doesn't get the big, hey, way to go, dude. It doesn't get that. But without that, you don't have the rest of it.
You lose. I 100%. And our guy, Marvin and Matt might have driven a little bit in there, but that was Lars. We tasked him with that. I mean, he just go out, run laps. And in addition to that, the cool thing that Lars was able to do is he started giving us a lot of information that was going to be good for the last 6 hours. Like, this car is really good in this part of the race, or this part of the track. He's going to be hard to pass here. This guy's saving fuel. I can tell he's saving fuel. These guys aren't saving fuel. We started asking Lars to save some fuel, and Lars would do it. So we could get a really good read on what was possible on fuel savings. How much could we save, and how much did it cost us in lap time? you can do in practice for a lap or two, but it's never as accurate as if you do 10 laps of fuel saving. So Lars was doing that work for us. So we knew exactly what we could get. We could see in those 5 or 6 stints in that period, could we get a lap longer than our competition? And we would watch, okay, they did 30 laps, 30 laps, 30 laps. We did 30, 30. Now we did 31, 31. Did anybody else do 31? Could anybody do 32? No, we never saw anybody do 32. So we kept working on that to build that database for the last 6 hours. And Lars did that heavy lifting, like you said, Ross.
Had anything, how was the car at this point? Had anything broken? Had anybody hit anything? Had anything fallen off? Like,
the mirrors.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
So when Ori was in the car, he got pushed high. It was like, I think he was 3 wide on the high side, and a prototype tried to make it 4 wide, and it got really crunchy. And and Ori got pushed into the wall, outside wall, ripped the right side mirror off, just poof, gone. That was gone before 6 hours.
Where on the track? What point?
NASCAR 4, coming out of NASCAR 4.
So like $1.80, how fast are you going? $1.80? Like what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just got one of those Darlington stripe kind of things.
What did he say anything on the radio when it happened?
He goes, my right mirror is gone.
I don't have a mirror anymore.
Okay. And then it immediately, it immediately went to, my thought was, well, we have Ken and Justin, our 2 spotters, who are like top notch spotters. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. We don't need mirrors. We got those guys. Those guys will keep them safe. Then the left side mirror got knocked off. Can't remember, before 12 hours. Okay. And it was a side-to-side contact, and it just cleaned the left side mirror straight off the car. So we had no mirrors from halfway on to the end of the race. But the spotters are so good, and all teams have super good spotters. I'm partial to ours. They are fantastic.
And someday we need to do a episode on spotting.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's an art. It's a science.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
And it's completely unsung. And if you've watched anybody do it, there's an element of flow state to it. There's an element like the immense amount of communication skills it takes to shut up at the right time, convey the right information at the right time, and also start talking at the point where something is going, like what you're saying is going to be useful, and it won't be over by the time you get the message out. Like all of that big matrix of brain think. It's great.
And at Daytona, there are 2 kinds of spotters. One sits in the old media room, which turns into this big sweat box of 25 typically guys
so gross,
honking down energy bars and whatever else to keep them alive.
So bad.
And the other bunch of spotters are on the roof in the freezing cold. And I know I did what was it, about 5 years ago or 4 years ago, when it was really cold. It was probably the coldest we ever had.
Mm-hmm.
I was up there on the top and had one of those little tiny little one-man tent things. Yep. And you're just up there and you're freezing cold and you're up there for hours and hours. And it's, yes, the focus it takes to do that. And you got, your iPad and your laptop and your phone, and you're monitoring all this stuff and you're listening. Tangent. It's not the tangent. We'll do another show on that.
I'm assuming it's...
Our guys, Justin and Ken, split. They do 4-hour shifts, and I think that's fairly typical. They would do 4 hours on, 4 hours off. But 4 hours on, think about it. You got to watch your car. You got to talk on the radio. You have to watch it. You are like laser focused in for 4 straight hours. It's crazy. But we had those guys. We had no mirrors. We had those guys. We also have a radar camera that goes out the back of the car, and there's a display for the driver that shows it's a camera basically. It's like a backup camera from your car, but it has a radar that actually shows objects on the screen that are coming at it. So if a car's coming to pass it, it'll show arrows to show which side it's going to pass on, and it changes colors based on the class. It can recognize a GTD car versus a prototype and change colors, so it gives you an idea of the closing rate of the car coming up too. So our drivers had that, plus the spotters, no side mirrors, and we started debate in the stand. Is it better aerodynamically to have mirrors or not have mirrors. And we're still not sure because it changes the flow around the car, and they shape those mirrors and put them in the right spot so the flow is good. So we're still not sure whether it's good to have mirrors or not, but we had none.
Okay, so sorry for the tangent, but I got to tell a funny story. So I did 24 1 year in a Celine GT car, and we'd had many problems up to the start of the race, mechanical problems. And I started the race, and just before the race, I said, hey, we've installed one of these rear view camera things so that you've got, because their visibility out the rear was next to impossible in that car.
Which Celine? Do you remember?
That GT, Celine GT, I can't remember what it was.
The big, long, fat, big, long, wide, flat, low thing?
Yeah.
Holy hell, wow.
And so I'm on the pace lap, I'm warming up and everything, come down, get the green flag, go sailing down into turn 1, pass a car, come out of there through the little kink, and I look in there and it shows a car passing me on the right. And I'm like, okay, got to give a little room there. So I kind of just leave a little bit to the left. All of a sudden, it's there on the left. They had got the things mixed up. So everything I saw in the mirror was on the opposite side or in this camera thing. So I drove the whole first in. And at some point during the pit stop, they reached in and flicked a switch and it flipped it the other way. But that first stint with that thing looking the wrong way was, I was wishing I was more dyslexic.
Wow.
I didn't know you ran Daytona in one of those things. I tested one of the last road cars before Steve closed up shop on those things. And they looked like, I don't know if anybody remembers, but they looked like, imagine a McLaren F1 crossed with like, oh hell, every generic supercar from the 90s and early 2000s, but in a good way. And then kind of silly putty stretched wider and longer and lower. And I remember testing it on the road. This must have been 06, 07, 08 I think it was for Automobile Magazine. And you get into it and there's some exotics that feel like real cars. And then there are some exotics where it's very clearly, it's not even a homologation special thing, right? It's just, this is a thing that is clearly a race car and we threw a carpet into it and you're going to be uncomfortable and you can't see anything and it will be loud and very stiff and wonderful. And it was great. But I had no idea you ran one of those things at Daytona. Where did you guys finish? How did it go?
Unfortunately, one of our drivers finished in the wall.
It's a place you could finish there. It's not against the rules.
Yeah.
Well, our camera is made by Bosch. It's been around for a long time. I think most GT cars now have that camera in there. So it's a standard thing. Works really good. Anyway, so no mirrors. We were fine. Good spotters. Right. Ken and Justin kept them safe. And we're now at 20, we're now with the sun's up. And I think poor Marvin might have had the sun up stint, which is blinding and stuff like that. But you kind of like you said, Ross, that overnight stint, you're just grinding and doing your thing. And it's like, you don't really see the end and you're too far from the start and you're just kind of doing it. And the sun comes up. And you get to watch the sunrise from the pits, and things start to take on this little bit of glow, and they get brighter and brighter and brighter. And it sounds silly, but it does kind of rejuvenate you. You're like, okay, this is daylight, and that's when, and you don't really schedule it this way, but that's when you kind of go, okay, the sun's up, we're on the lead lap. We haven't had any problems. The drivers like the car. We check in. We have our tire technicians, Ashley and Brianna, two of the best tire technicians in IMSA. You go, Ashley, Brianna, how many sets of tires do we have left? We got this many left. Charlie goes, da, 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 da. Okay, we can single stint from here on out because he's managed them well. With the two ladies and Charlie have managed the tires well. The drivers have done a good job. We got enough tires to go to the end, single stint. We can get 31 laps on a tank of gas, which is more than half the other field. That's looking good. Our drive times look good. It's morning. Okay, so we've reevaluated and we're in a great spot. We don't have to do anything special. We don't have to make up 4 laps or figure out some fancy strategy to do this. We just got to keep plugging away. And that's what it looks like at sunrise for us.
Okay, so it's, what is it, a little before 10 in the morning, got around 4 hours to go. Where were you? You're on the lead lap. Where were you position-wise?
In the top 5, I'll say.
Okay.
We were solid top 5-ish, but that can change with pit stops and everything else. But we were a top 5, running top 5.
I love that feeling, and it's amazing how universal it is, right? Like, it happens in the world's worst club car, in the world's worst endurance race, on the worst track in the country. And it obviously also, I've had people tell me it happens at Le Mans and Daytona over and over again. That thing where the sun comes up, you get a second wind, everything's gorgeous, and all of a sudden it's like somebody just breathes more life into you. It's great. And you get that there's that universal need to kind of reevaluate what's going on. It's so cool. I mean, it's probably has something to do with how the body clock processes things, but it's so great. Ross?
So Sam, I think the interesting thing about that, and Jeff, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is you have to control that. Because if you're at 4 hours going, oh, we're going to win this thing, you start doing dumb things, or at least in my experience. Definitely I would do dumb things.
I was going to say, if you're me, you just continue doing the dumb things you did all night. But carry on, please.
So, but there's a balance there, Jeff, right? Where you go, okay, if we do this right, we do this right. If we keep doing this, we got a shot at this thing. But you don't go, we got this thing locked up.
No, because
right?
All you're trying to do, really, even at that point, is you're still just trying, I remember I said it. I said, hey guys, we only have one Watkins Glen to go, which is a 6-hour race. And by the middle of the summer, you're like, wow, this is a long race, this 6-hour thing, and we have that much more to go yet. And you're just trying to put yourself in a position to be able to win the race. Just positioning yourself. You can't win the race with 6 hours to go. And you'll get a wake-up call like we got about that time. It might have been just before sunrise. We came in for a pit stop. I'm thinking we're going to go on a tangent here. Try to avoid a tangent. We came in for a pit stop.
Lean in. Do it.
And we put fuel in the car, but IMSA calls it energy now because we have these torque sensors. So we have to have our fuel probe plugged into the car for a certain amount of time to add the required amount of megajoules. We're not adding electricity really, but we have to be plugged in for this certain amount of time. And a timer starts at IMSA to show that we've been plugged into the car for a specific amount of time based on how much energy we used in the stint before. So if we used 800 megajoules, we have to be plugged in for the equivalent of 800 megajoules, whether we need that much gas or not. Our timer didn't start. So we plugged in, the timer didn't start. We had enough, we filled up the gas tank, pulled out, and left the pits. And we had added no energy. So in IMSA's, what IMSA saw was that we were driving around out of gas, and that's illegal. You get a penalty for that. So we're like, oh man. So we came in pit lane for an emergency service and tried to fill it up again. And the timer didn't start. So we went around again, came emergency service, and then it worked. And then went back out again. So we had this big problem we were trying to solve, figuring out why it wouldn't work. Turns out that, and many teams had this problem, the timer, the energy adding timer, stops counting energy if your wheels are turning. Because the logic is like, well, you can't be adding energy with your fuel rig to the car if the wheels are turning, so it shuts it off. Well, when the guys would change the front tires, they would, they put the gun on there, the nut gets tight, and then they pull it off. Well, when they tighten the nut, it spins the wheel a little bit. You obviously, it does like a half a turn, right, when you pull the thing off. And the wheel speed sensor picks up that slight movement and stops the energy from recording. Oh, man.
The system has outsmarted itself, and
it
Matrix
has.
owns you.
IMSA has to address this because it was us and 10 other GT cars that had this problem. But we had to sort through all of that. Baptiste is the guy in charge of all of that, and he's looking at it like, why did the energy stop? Is it a switch? Is it an IMSA problem? Is it our switch? Is it the probe? Is it the da-da-da-da-da-da-da? And we are hooked up by Discord, which I'm sure a lot of gamers know what it is. It's a like an instant messenger chat kind of thing. All the GM teams are hooked up by Discord back to the GM tech trailer in the paddock with all the GM powertrain guys and other GM tech guys monitoring all of it. And Baptiste and them were able to sort out what had happened, because it had happened to one of the pro cars earlier on, and it had happened to another GM car. And so all of GM engineering was trying to figure out what to do to prevent this from happening. We're like, okay, we got to put your foot on the brake so that thing can't turn. And that didn't even seem to work once, because the rattling of the gun was enough just to turn that sensor one tooth and pick up the next pulse and stop it from recording. Anyway, it was a big problem we had to work through, and Charlie Baptiste came up with a solution, which I'm not going to reveal, but we didn't have that problem the rest of the race. So
reminds me of the old line from, what was the Pogo cartoon? We have met the enemy, and he is us.
He is us, exactly, exactly. So that's the one thing that you're like you said, Russ, like you're okay. Well, and now we're pretty good, and things are good, and all of a sudden, boom, that one hits you in the face, and you're like, oh, we're horrible. We can't win. We probably won't even finish because of this problem. So that's where we sorted it by sunrise, and things were looking good. Top 5, good performing car. Lars is like, car's great. Marvin's like, man, this car is really, really good. Doing all the things they want. Good handling, good balance, good tire wear, good fuel economy. So we're kind of looking like we're in a position for a chance.
As Daytona years go, how much attrition? Because the mark for attrition is always like who's left when the sun comes up, right? How much of the field was left relative to years past? Was it a bad year? A lot of cars gone, or a lot of cars still running?
Man, I think running. These cars don't break down anymore. You can run flat out. They just don't break down. The only reason the Inception car had a suspension problem. Other than that, it would have been crashes, I think. I don't know that. I guess Lally's car, the Magnus car, blew up. But you remember that, like, blew up. GT cars don't blow up. That never happens.
What about, I was thinking of crashes. Like how many, just people driving into each other or themselves. But how did it go from that perspective?
There was that one big crash. Yeah, there was that one big crash late evening Saturday night. In the dark, that took out a GTP car, 2 P2 cars, and I think 1 or 2 GT cars, right?
Yeah. That wasn't the one yours was involved in, because you guys had a little ding too.
Yeah, we had a. I mean, driver just got in the marbles and nosed it into the tire wall, but then backing out, those things have as you know, Jeff, the reverse gear is like made out of silly putty, and he used a little bit too much torque trying to back it out of there and strip the gear, and then drove back to the pits, and so it meant replacing the entire gearbox.
Yeah.
So
this was a P2 car, right?
Yeah. But that was like we were barely like 2 or 3 hours into the race. Stephen had just driven the opening stint and done an amazing, fantastic job, and Hunter just got off bad. Early in the race, Jeff, and this is everybody had to manage this, but there were so few full course yellows at the beginning of the race. The track was like mega covered with marbles.
Yep.
So if you got just a little offline, you were done, and that's what happened to us. So yeah.
So okay, Jeff. So cruising into the last 4 hours.
Yep.
You have a bunch of choices to make. There's been a lot of luck, and you've done some stuff right. Everybody's getting tired. Not getting tired. Everybody is tired. Everybody else is making mistakes. Maybe your guys are making mistakes. Maybe the driver lineup needs to shift. What did it look like for you with, at 10 o'clock in the morning with basically 4 hours to go?
At that point, we knew we had a good car. Then you can start to backplay the pit windows pretty accurately. And it became obvious at that point that that everybody was going to need a splash. In other words, you couldn't do it on, let's say, 3 more stops. You're going to need 3 stops and another stop that was only going to be 5 or 8 seconds of gas. But there's still opportunities for yellows, which throws that all out the window, so you don't really know. We're looking at driver time, and there's a thing that IMSA has called the 4 and 6 rule, where you can only drive 4 hours in any 6-hour period. And that becomes real tricky at the end. Again, we won't tangent off, but on sliding scales and stuff. So you start to calculate that. I'm lucky that we have we have me and 3 smart people on the stand, and we could give, Baptiste can look at the fuel stuff, look at the windows. Charlie can look at the tires. What do we got for tires? Do we use our scrub tires? Because we scrubbed a couple sets. When do we use those? Do we use stickers? Do we keep warm tires on because the outlaps are better? So he's looking at all of that. Andrew is scanning the close competition. I said we were in the top 5. He's scanning all the other 4 cars, listening to what their strategy might be. And I'm trying to figure out the 4 and 6 driver rotation rule while talking to the driver on the radio and giving him updates and asking him what we need for fuel save or not fuel save or whatever. So we're working all of that out, and it becomes obvious that it's going to be these 3 or 4 cars at the end. And we decide that we probably need to save a little fuel to try to make this even stops. And Matt's in the car. No, Marvin was in the car. Marvin starts saving fuel for us, and we're doing really good. It looks like we can make it. And we put Matt in the car. He goes out, and I'm going to get the timeline wrong here a little bit, but with about 2 hours to go, with 1 and a little pit stops to go, a yellow comes out. And we're right about ready to pit, like we were going to have to pit. But Matt and Marvin had saved enough fuel to put us that kind of 1 lap better than 2 of the other cars we were racing against.
Nice.
Yellow comes out, and they have to come in the pits into a closed pit because they don't have enough gas to putt around under yellow for 2 laps until the pits open up. So they come into a closed pit, which is a drive-through penalty once the race starts again, or once at the end of the yellow. So they would have to go to the back of the GT field. We had saved enough fuel. Matt and Marvin had done a good enough job. Where Matt's driving around, Baptiste has the exact number. He has to get, I'm going to make this number up because I don't want to give away the real number. He has to get 21 megajoules exactly every lap to make it under these yellows, to make it to the pits. Matt's going as slow as he can. IMSA's on the radio. Car 13, catch up, catch the pack. And Matt's just putting along. He's going up the banking when he can get a run up the banking without using anything. And then he's diving down the banking with the clutch in, not touching the gas. And we're trying to get, because we have to have at least we have to have more than 0 megajoules in our tank when we get to the pit in. Well, finally the pits open up, and Matt comes out of NASCAR 4 and coasts at about 1 megajoule, coasts all the way to the pit cone lights and comes in, and we make it. The other 2 didn't. So they serve their penalty. Now we go back out. There's really 3 of us left, and that's really all that's left at that point, with under an hour to go maybe, and we've got enough. We got enough fuel to make it.
What's going through your head? How far before the end of the thing did you know you had a legit real shot? It was probably maybe, you don't want to talk about it, but might happen.
The minute we were able to put those 2 cars out of contention, basically because of that fuel saving thing, then I knew it was a 3-way fight. I knew we had a good car, and I knew we were, like I said before, the ultimate goal, put yourself in a position to have a shot to win. That's when we were in that position.
So when did you know that it came down to, at some point it comes down to, okay, Matt, do the job.
Then.
Take strategy, take tires, take fuel, everything. We've used all that up. It comes down to that guy that's behind the wheel.
Right then, at that point, after Matt had decided, him and I had worked on that fuel saving strategy, and he actually came up with that we needed to do that at the same time we did on the stand. Matt's like, hey, I think we need to do da 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 da, and we're like, yeah, da da da, do that, and we're kind of trying to talk about it without talking about it over the radio.
You said you had a code for it based on. Can you tell us what it was? What the code was?
We have some codes.
I loved the list of codes this year. I wish we could talk about them because it's so completely struck to the corner of every romantic bone in my body. And the way you pitched it, the way you told it was, forgive me, was Matt said, I think we need to blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh yeah, you do. Yeah, that's good. Oh yeah. Sam likes that. Yeah. And you're like, yes, you do. Drive how so-and-so would blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. I'll say at one point when we didn't need the code anymore, Matt goes, we're done with old Formula One drivers, right? And I said, yes.
Yeah, because that was the name. So it was like, so-and-so name is the code for yada, yada. But
right. So we were done with old Formula One drivers. And as you said, Ross, that was it. Now I get a little bit of okay, there's nothing I can do to help him anymore other than give him gaps, positions. The spotters are taking care of him from prototypes behind. Time left, so he knows his aggressive level. If there's 20 minutes left, his aggression level to the car ahead is different than if there's 3 minutes left. Keep him informed on that, but at the same time, don't bug the crap out of him because he is freaking trying to win the 24 Hours of Daytona from third place. And so Matt's good enough where I was giving him some of that stuff with 40 minutes to go, and he's like, all right, I got it. Just, I don't need it anymore. He wasn't, what was the thing?
Leave me alone. I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, he said that in
the greatest things.
That was
the greatest things Kimi ever gave us.
Right. So Matt gave me the British Kimi thing. Got it. Because he's smart enough. He can see going into turn 3. He can glance across to the exit of 3 and see the two cars he's racing against and see if that gap is bigger this lap than it was last lap. He doesn't need me to tell him it's 1.2 and last lap it was 1.3. He can see that. So he's got this whole thing. Matt's super smart as a race car driver and as a strategist and sees the global picture. So he knew where he was, what was happening, all of that. Every once in a while, they'd give him a time to go kind of thing so that he could gauge what he needed to do. And we set off with that. And he got behind the 27 car, which was the car for the lead. And he gets behind him. It was the harder racing Aston
Martin.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
He gets behind him and he's right on him. I mean, this is for the lead. He's right on him through the kink, through turn 5, through turn 6. He comes up on the banking and right behind him, and all of a sudden Matt gets on the radio and he goes, smoke, right front smoking. And all of us on the stand are like, oh man. Immediately, Baptiste and Charlie are looking at the telemetry for tire pressures, and I don't even have to say to them, how are the tire pressures? They're like, pressures are good. And I said to Matt, tire pressures are good. Keep going. Like he thought about lifting. He never did. He didn't know what the smoke was, but he was going until that thing just stopped running.
I knew I enjoyed Matt.
Right. And the smoke went, and the cameras, we could see we have like 16 monitors. We can see one of the cameras picked up our car, and you can see the smoke pouring off the thing. And then it stopped going into the bus stop. We're like, all right. And Matt's right back on the guy again. And he's going and going and going. And then he passed him, 2 laps later, out on the inside of 6, out onto the banking, and got a great bus stop, gapped him by like a half a second. And nice. Then I was giving him his gap because it's hard to see directly behind, especially with no mirrors. And he pulled out to like 1.4 seconds and kind of held it there for the last 2 laps, and we won.
Did you, so this is, forgive me, I should remember this. this isn't your fourth? Is it your fifth? Or is it
Only three.
Only three?
Only three.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yep.
So how every time you get down to that last hour, that last few laps, have you felt the same? Has your mental state been the same? And when it finally happens, like, what's it felt like each time?
I think you're working the race so much that you don't think about what it's going to be like to win the thing.
Yeah.
And when you finally do, this one was different for me. This one, because the group of people we have are very young. They're super dedicated. They've worked so hard. They've put in so much effort. There was multiple times last year when the thing looked like a disaster, where they could have given up and not tried, and just been, well, whatever, it's just a job. Not these guys and girls. They worked harder. They worked on their pit stops. They studied their videos. Jose, our driver changer, practiced driver changers without the drivers, just so he could practice and get better and get better. They, our crew chief, Andrew Stittle, and Antoine, our tire changers, practiced tire changers over and over. I'd be like, all right, guys, we don't need a tire change at the end of this practice session. They're like, yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. Got to do one. Our fueler, Kevin, jumps off the wall and hits the fuel probe with one shot in midair. He can do that.
Nice.
I mean, these guys, our tire helpers, it's just amazing how hard they worked. And so for me, what I was proud of is that they got to experience it. I was watching them and seeing how they experienced it and how cool it was for them to get most of them, it's their first Daytona win. And
that's so cool.
So it was cool for them to experience and get the joy of seeing the fruits of that labor pay off. And sometimes it takes 10 years or never pays off, but they got to see it after 1 year. So for me, that's what I enjoyed the most about winning this one.
That's so cool. What is it? Both of you know this. What is it like to have the watch? For those who don't know, it's called the Rolex 24. There's a Rolex Daytona watch. You get a watch. You win Daytona, you get a Daytona. What's it like when that shows up?
Ross?
I cannot remember standing on the podium. I've seen photos, but I don't remember standing on the podium and being awarded the Rolex watch. I don't remember it.
Really?
I don't know if it was just so exhausted and so like, what just happened kind of thing.
Yeah.
Literally to this day, like I try to imagine what that was like, and I can't. It's blank for me. I wish I could. So, and I'm sure there are other drivers that remember every little bit of it, but for me, it's just, I don't know. I came home with a watch.
If anybody wants to know, and I don't know what the copyright rights are and everything, maybe Mike can put it in, but go search for Matt Bell's interview or his reaction after the race on NBC and see the tears in his eyes and what it meant to him.
To me, that
so
was
cool.
the highlight of the entire event, seeing Matt at the end of the race. And, I've known Matt for a bunch of years and a great friend. And it's just, I was so happy for him.
Yep.
Oh yeah. And then Jeff won too.
Yeah.
He's got too many of those things anyways.
But that was so cool. And that was, what did it mean, Matt? It meant everything. And the way he describes it. So if we can't attach it to this episode, go check that out. And that's, I could never explain it. And I don't think you could either, Ross, explain it as well as that interview explains it.
And that's one of those things that's so hard to convey. I've been to countless pro enduros over the years, and like even if you've done a bunch of club races, even if you've done overnight races, how a fraction of what it feels like, but to know how much is at stake and to know how many people were pulling at the absolute maximum against you, pulling everything they've got down to the last tire changer, the last, dude sweeping out the trailer. And you see it over and over again. And some people show it and some people don't, but everybody, the rush of emotion after a full day of doing everything you possibly can without really sleeping much, as hard as you can and as long as you can against some of the best in the world doing exactly that. It's this giant sine wave of roller coaster, and the people who let it show. I mean, everybody's human, right? There's no wrong way to be real or to be a person, but the people who let it show, or who are overwhelmed enough by the exhaustion and the emotion to let it show, or that's just who they are. It's magic. It's one of those great big. It's a fire hose of empathy aimed at your face. And if you've been there in the paddock or even sitting in the stands, it's this wash feeling that comes over you. It's really, really cool.
Yep.
I'm so glad. Congrats, man. That's
Thank
amazing.
You.
I'm so
Thank
glad
you.
it went well.
It was a lot of fun. It was great for Andrew, our team owner, to get that.
Yeah.
To be it was the GM sent Andrew a very, very, very nice letter from high up execs of GM. And it's a personal letter, so I can't share the letter, but apparently we were the first non-factory Corvette winner of Daytona ever.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't know how exactly they say that. There was Greenwood Corvettes and things like that, so I don't know how exactly that is, but it was... somebody will call me out on that. But anyway, it was a big deal with Corvette and GM to have a privateer, at least in the modern era, win Daytona. Because, we've seen the 3 and the 4 win before and stuff like that. But this was a privateer team. We bought a car and raced it with much support from GM and Pratt & Miller. But on the technical side and the building of the car. But that was a big deal for GM, especially their customer program. This is they're just starting the second year of ever having a customer racing program, and they won Daytona. So it was quite a big deal for Andrew and GM and everybody else. Even Keith Willis, our team manager, whose brother Ian and him owned AIM Autosport, and they've won Daytona before, and they've been a top Canadian team and a top IMSA team. Keith's seen everything 100 times. And he was super, super thrilled to win it with this group again. The guys and girls that he had led. So, yeah, it meant a lot to a lot of people.
That's great. It's such a neat, having now met those guys and hung out with them for a couple of days, guys and gals. It's such a neat group of people. It's really, really cool. Congratulations to Andrew, to AWA, and to you, and to everyone else in the team. You guys did it. That's a hell of a thing. And that's what's so cool about something like this is the more you learn about endurance racing, the more you learn about pro racing, the more you realize what a mountain that is, and just to climb up, and just how many things can go wrong, even down to the last minute.
Yep.
And take it all away from you. And that's the whole that's racing thing, right?
Yep.
The notion that there's so much you can't control.
So before we wrap up here, Jeff, you've got to explain the image that you sent to Sam and I late last night. Or
what did you send last night? What did now
So
I'm scared.
it goes back to that smoke.
Yeah.
The
smoke. Yeah, explain why the smoke, because
the smoke,
that's
and
incredible.
we're like, oh, we're going to lose. We've just blown a tire or something like that. And it went away. And then we didn't even think about it. We're like, okay, well, we won the race, and we went to victory, pushed the car, we went to victory lane, We put the car, I didn't, the guys, girls, put the car back in the trailer, and they drove it back to Toronto because we have to test in Sebring in 4 days.
Of course.
So they drove it back to Toronto to get it ready, and they get to the shop, and they take the hood off at the shop. Now we're talking, 4 days later, and there is this piece of skid jab rock, which is a very, very, very hard wood. It's like metal, poking through the inner fender well into where the tire is, almost touching the tire, like a half an inch away from the tire, stuck in the inner fender, in the Kevlar inner fender. And I would say it's 2 inches wide by 12 inches long and an inch and a half thick. And what had happened, we went back and looked at the video. What had happened is, coming up onto turn 6, Matt's driving along, he's right on the bumper. I mean, he had just kind of tapped the Aston Martin a little bit, and suddenly there's this big clunk, and he gets on the banking, and smoke starts pouring off the car. off the right front. What had happened is this piece of Jabrock must have been either on the track or came off the Aston, I'm not sure. But we ran over it, and it picked it up. The tire, right front tire, picked it up. And as it was run over, it must have got stuck into the tread, came around the tire, and when that piece of wood got to the top of the tire, fired straight off forward through the Kevlar inner fender and got wedged halfway out of the inner fender and halfway in. When he got in the banking and it loaded the right front, the tire pressed into the wood and started smoking like crazy. And it must have just pushed the wood forward just enough where it wasn't touching anymore. And that was that. So talk about ways you can lose. I mean, we came
the luck
as close as you can to losing that race.
Sometimes you go, you know what? It was meant to be. I know that sounds all Zen-like, but it was like, it was meant to be that you guys were going to win no matter what.
Right.
The photo, God, it looks like, you look at it and it literally looks like somebody put it into a weapon and fired it through the fender wheel.
Yeah.
And it's, looking at it, the first thing that struck me was, holy hell, it rode the wheel. It rode the tire all the way around, right? Did not end up getting thrown off the thing at any other point in the fender, didn't go into anything under the car. And I mean, it makes sense now that I think about it, because the tire's hot and sticky and Jabrock's relatively light, right?
Yeah.
You see where it shot out, and it's also like inches from a headlight projector, right? Like, not that that's a big deal, but not inches, less than that. But so much could have gone wrong. It's amazing. The picture's great. It's so good.
And it just shows you that, like we said when I started, we didn't do anything special. We didn't do anything heroic, although Matt's last 20 minutes were pretty heroic. So I'll give him heroic there.
Yep.
But we put him in a position to do his heroic stuff. And world-class drivers are paid to, and they're world-class because they can do heroic stuff. So up until that point, we didn't do anything but put Matt in a position to do his hero stuff like he does. At that point, we have had 1,000 different things that could have sunk our whole program, including a hunk of wood jammed in our fender, or the fuel timer thing, or the mirrors getting ripped off, or whatever. And like I told the guys, it's the people that adapt best and quickest are the ones that win this race, because everybody's going to have problems. And we had a long list of problems and still won.
I guess that's the best way to sum this up, right? Like racing, the right stuff went wrong. So on that note, we are now out of time. That's the show. Again, we're heading into our second year doing this. We all want to take the time, Ross and Jeff and I want to take the time to thank everybody who listens. Everybody's been so great. This show has grown way beyond where we expected. Thousands of people now every week, and it keeps getting bigger. It means so much. We've got some fun stuff in store this year. I hope you're looking forward to it. I know I am. I want to give a quick thanks to everyone who wrote in or DM'd or texted to ask when we were coming back. We're gone for, I think, about 6 weeks by the time this airs. Thank you for that, for your support. Lets us know that you care. It matters. Thank you for all the merch you've bought, and for all the people who found me and Ross and Jeff in the real world and let us know that you like what we're doing. Before I read us out, I want to give one more personal shout out. This is a favor to someone who asked for it on the little checkout form when they bought merch from our website, which is shameless plug, itsnotthecar.com. It's Ben and Alex asked for a shout out to Ben's dad, Eric Eisen, and the Leapfrog Racing team. This is the shout out, guys. Thank you for the support, and thank you for listening. Everybody else, thank you. We love doing this, and we'll be back. On that note, I'm going to read us out, which means you guys don't want to do it, do you?
No, it's all you.
Nope.
No, yeah. It's Not the Car is written, produced, and pulled off hiatus by the three hosts you heard today. Mike Perlman is our executive producer. Sometimes he answers my phone calls, but that's only when he's feeling generous, because I'm very annoying. You think I'm annoying on the mic? I'm doubly annoying on the phone. I'm the show's creator. If you like this episode and you'd like to support what we do here, check out patreon.com/notthecar and click Become a Member. We also have a merch store and show site at itsnotthecar.com. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a review on Apple or Spotify, or I don't know, really bathroom walls work, markers for a good time call notthecar.com, and share it with anyone you think might enjoy it. My tongue doesn't work. Your recommendations make a huge difference, and they really do help us keep It's Not the Car on the air. As always, thank you for listening.
Have fun.
Thank you. Have fun.